Hi everyone, this is Marnell coming to you from another little nook and cranny here on Kiepersol. So I am in the distillery. This is kind of a secret here. Not that many people know that we have a distillery, and there we have a VinDome still. So Dylan, our distiller, is back there doing a little straightening up for the weekend. We do tours on the weekend. And I'll get his attention here in just a minute and introduce him. But I want to tell you all why there's a distillery in the heart of a wine estate. So first, what is a distillery? For some of you, you may not even know. So winery is where you produce wine. So we have a vineyard. A lot of people think that the vineyard is the winery. I've heard that misconception. So the vineyard's where you grow the grapes. The winery is where you make the wine. The tasting room is where you buy the wine, taste the wine, and gather with your friends. Now, a distillery is where you make spirits. So spirits being vodka, bourbon. We do rum, and agave spirit. If you like agave or tequila, we do an agave spirit. So a spirit essentially is where you take a beer or a wine and you put it into a pot still, or any type of still essentially. You can even take actual beer or actual wine and put it into a pot on your stove, and when you cook it, the steam that rises at a certain temperature, so 173 degrees is the boiling point of ethanol, you're actually separating that steam is separating the spirit from the beer or the wine. So this still does just that. So we started out as a winery that did not produce any spirits at all. A lot of you might remember K.E. Cellars in Tyler. So K.E. Cellars was a winery that we had in town. From 1999 to 2006, we were producing wine only here at Kiepersol. And then in 2006, after the Texas Department of Ag got some lobbyists and they saw the economic impact of wineries on the state, is so interesting. We were the 27th working winery in the state of Texas and the 34th bonded winery in the state of Texas. Today, there are over 500 wineries in production. So in a 25-year span, there was significant growth in the wine industry, which is amazing. And people care about where their stuff comes from and their wine comes from. And now lots of people in Texas can drink local. So the same thing happened with beer. And so we were in Tyler from 2006 to 2012. In 2012, and we were the only winery at that time in Tyler. It's raining. I know this is live. I hope that it's not too loud. So we were the only people in Tyler selling a closed container of alcohol for a good 6 years. And then wet dry was on the election. And in 2012, and I remember my dad calling my sister and I to the house saying we need to have a meeting. There's friends of ours going, hey, wet dry is on the election. How do you want us to vote? And for us, and Dad always gave us an opportunity to talk about, or he always found the opportunity to talk about how we immigrated to a free country, because we're immigrants from South Africa. And freedom truly means that if on that side of the county line you can buy alcohol in the great state of Texas, then on this side of the county line, you should be able to buy alcohol as well, and not just be left for a winery or a distillery or have a little special permit. You should be able to buy. So we were selling wine. From 99 to 2004, we were those crazy foreigners 11 miles south of Loop 323. There were not that many people coming out here. And then in 2006, when the lobbyists started helping, Texas Department of Ag got involved, cotton farmers up in the high plains were ripping out thousands of acres of cotton, putting in vineyards. We saw this beautiful, beautiful growth of Texas wine. And it was time for us to take the wine to the people, because we weren't getting our sales up enough. So we took the wine to the people. We opened this little tasting room in Tyler, and it was called KE Cellars. Some of you might know about it, and or have been. And we were selling all of our wine direct to consumer. We had some of the wine in the marketplace, selling it wholesale, but KE Cellars allowed us to sell wine straight from the winery to all the people of Tyler, Texas. And it was awesome. We took all that revenue and we brought it back, and we increased our vineyards, we increased production here, and we sold so much wine during that time that we could not keep up production. So we actually reached out to our brothers and sisters in the industry, and we said, hey, we'd love to carry your wine. And so we bought their wine in what's called a bond-to-bond purchase, and we sold their wine. So we sold Messina Hoff wine, we sold Llano Estacado, Fall Creek, Flat Creek, Enoch Stomp, and the list goes on. We sold these wines as our own. And it was a neat little Texas tasting room. And so now this wet-dry election comes in to play. And Dad had some time to process this, and he calls my sister and I and our husbands in for a meeting, and he says, hey, we have a decision to make. People are wondering, how should we vote? And you know, the truth is, you don't have that much, I don't think we have as much influence as we think, right? And if you're gonna vote for freedom, which is what we stand for, then we need to vote wet. So what does that mean if you vote wet back in 2012 in Tyler, Texas? That means Walmart, Walgreens, CVS Pharmacy, Kid Jones gas station, Brookshire's, everybody's gonna have wine for sale. The dollar stores have wine for sale. You can find wine anywhere. Why would they come straight to us? And some of you may have followed along with us long enough to know that we had a big label change. So that discussion happened in 2012, and in 2012 we were prepping for bottling some 2010, 2011 wines. And we changed our label because that night we made a declaration as a family. We said, if Kiepersol wine can compete on the global market, the global economy, in terms of quality and price, we're gonna put a Kiepersol label on that bottle. But if it cannot compete in terms of quality and price, we're gonna have to figure out something else to do with it. Now, scale of economies, or economies of scale, makes us, we're a very small winery, so we don't have massive purchasing power, right? We're definitely not Gallo with a glass factory. So I'm in the distillery talking to you all about wine. This is gonna make sense. So for wine production, you have a bottle, so we call that glass. You have a label, you have a cork, you have a foil. I remember Yellowtail, Little Penguin, Barefoot Cellars didn't quite hit the market yet, but I remember there are quite a few wines that you can buy. White Zin was the sweet wine. Moscato hadn't done its big flourishing yet, and you can buy these wines, a pink wine, for $6.99. And $2 Chuck was a thing. You can buy a rosé for $4 in California, some for $2. So I remember we planted white Zinfandel grapes, and we were selling it out of KE Cellars for $10 a bottle, which is not that expensive. All of the packaging cost us $4 a bottle. So there was no way we can compete in terms of price. And I remember as I was sitting there processing this, going, okay, so there's wines that we can compete on the global market on in terms of price, but then there's ones we just can't. So what are we gonna do about it? And I remember telling my dad, we just planted all like 4 acres of white Zinfandel. What are we going to do with this white Zinfandel? And he said, well, I have a plan. And he told us about this vodka that he learned about called Ciroc. Ciroc vodka was a grape-based vodka. And he said, there's this vodka, they make it out of grapes. And he goes, no problem. We'll just take all that wine and we'll turn it into vodka, because vodka is a good product on the market. There's a high demand in 2012 for vodka. And this was just at the cusp of the bourbon boom, they say. And I remember thinking to myself and actually telling my dad, Daddy, we are not Russian. We don't drink vodka. How are we going to figure out how to make vodka? And he said, you know, grapes are a farming product, an ag product. And we take it from the perishable state to the non-perishable state, making vodka. And in France, they do the same thing. And they'll take it for the market that wants to make wine, they make wine. And then the market that wants to make brandy, they'll take that, and then the excess of that they'll take and produce grappa, or they'll produce vodka. And he said there's this new vodka out called Ciroc vodka, and they make it from grapes. So if they can make it from grapes, so can we. And I remember thinking, how in the world are we going to do that? We have to get a distillery permit, we have to do this. And he said, Dad had a thick accent, and he said, you know, I read the internet, and this is what we have to do. And he did it. And we became passionate about vodka. And my husband, my husband was a bourbon buff, loved bourbon, collected it, and he said, you know, if we've figured out how to make vodka, we ought to make some bourbon. And if my dad had an alcoholic beverage, it would be a rum and coke. So we said, well, let's try our hand at rum. And we started with those 3 spirits. And today we are still a micro-distillery. We're still producing spirits. That was 11, 12 years ago, or more now. I know 12 years ago that we've been producing spirits. And it started out as a byproduct. So people say, why do you have this little distillery in the heart of a wine estate? Well, it was to take those grapes from one perishable product to a sellable product to a product that the market wanted. And in South Africa, in our native tongue, there's a saying that says, a farmer makes a plan. And that was one of his plans, was hey, we can take this white Zin and turn it into vodka. So our label changed, the philosophy of wine that we bottle changed, and today we don't use our wine for spirit production any longer. Well, every now and then we'll throw a barrel of brandy in to age, or Dylan will make us some brandy for us to fortify some port with. But outside that, we've really become specialists in bourbon production and love drinking bourbon, making bourbon. But every bar that we have 3 bars, one in our clubhouse, one at our grand room, and one at our restaurant. And since COVID, 100% of the spirits that we sell for on-premise consumption and off is produced right here. So I'm gonna walk around with this selfie guidance here. Dylan, what did we catch you doing, brother?
Yeah, so today you caught us on the tail end of making bourbon. So today we did the final run in bourbon. So in bourbon you do 2 distillations. You do the stripping run and the final run. Okay. And today was the actual final run, which is a long run. So we started around 6 a.m. and it finished about 1 o'clock today.
So he's been distilling for a minute today.
You also caught us hydrating barrels.
Okay.
Which is, if you ever do a tour, you will see some barrels sitting out here. They're just, you fill them with water to make sure they don't leak, so you don't lose any of those spirits when you fill it up.
Okay. Dylan, here, we'll do this so we can have this behind us. I get him. Tell us, so I'm let's see, on the camera, I'm pointing to this thing right here. That's our still, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have a VinDome still. It's a 500-gallon VinDome copper pot. Copper, everybody assumes that, you know, it's copper because it looks nice. It actually has a chemical purpose. So when you distill and you create sulfites, copper and sulfites bond together, so it gives you a cleaner spirit. I don't know if you can see, but if you look really close on this still, you have those windows up there.
Oh,
So-
there's the wind. Whoops.
You can see 'em?
I'm not a good camera person, Dylan. There we go. So y'all, I almost pointed to the camera as if you can see it, but there's a window. There's one. You guys see those that we're pointing at?
So even if this is a stainless steel pot, which we have a copper, in stainless, every single of those windows will have copper there, so it can bind and make a cleaner spirit.
That's awesome.
Distilling though, I say if you can boil a pot of water, you can distill. The same principles work in distillation as when you're boiling a pot of water and you put that lid on, you have that water, the heat turns it into a vapor. Once that vapor hits that lid, it cools down just a little bit to recondense. So that's the distillation practice in short, essentially. You're just taking a solid, turning it into or you're taking a liquid, turning it to vapor, and we condense it back to a liquid.
Easy as pie. There you go. That's distilling. Dylan, I think everyone wants to know a little bit about you. So here's what I know about Dylan, y'all. I think he's a proud follower of Jesus, as am I and Valmay and his lovely bride, Carrie, first and foremost. Secondly, Dylan is a bourbon savant. That's what I call him anyway. He's passionate. I thought my husband was passionate about bourbon, and then so you left the big city of Houston. You found us kind of by accident.
Yeah, I found your when I was applying to UT Tyler for a degree in chemistry and fermentation, and then by happenstance there was a winery and distillery out here. So I decided to, when I go to learn how to make bourbon, why don't I actually practice it also?
So what did you leave in the big city?
So I was I audited hedge funds. So I was an auditor.
Y'all, he's smart. And knows numbers and can work a spreadsheet like no one I've ever seen, and can run a still. So something that's interesting to both of us and maybe to some of you is it's fun to watch what happens in the industry. And we're in a very, very interesting time in the wine and spirits industry right now. There's a little bit market correction happening.
Yeah, Marnell said I was a bourbon expert. Also means I probably drink a little bit too much bourbon also. But the market is in a recorrection right now. You know, if you go back to COVID period when everybody was at home and these new apps called Drizzle was popping up and the stock market for all delivery apps were skyrocketing, bourbon was also. People were staying home, rediscovering the bourbon industry. That carried over for about 2 to 3 years, and the big distilleries forecasted their supply going forward with that same demand. The demand has kind of dropping off. The youth of today time is not drinking. They're turning away from wine and spirits. So we have a giant supply of bourbon that's sitting on the shelves. If you are a bourbon hunter, as they call them,
This is a buyer's market,
yes.
baby.
You used to be able, you could not find bottles that are sitting on shelves today. And you can go to Fat Dog's, Troop, Oasis, and find bottles that are like the Cook Barrel Proof and Blanton's that used to move that just are on the shelves now.
There's a lot of good bourbon in the market, and thankfully, we are a micro-distillery. So we produce, how often do you distill? Like 3 or 4 days a month now? It used to be a little bit.
Yeah, so right now, this year, we're on pace to, after these barrels get filled right here, we would make 14 barrels this year. So we're on pace for about 28 right now.
28 barrels. And between Dylan and Jim, there's 30 years of passion in this industry. And one thing I can say about both of them is that they're perfectionists. And baby these barrels from the temperature, how they treat them. What's something else that makes our bourbon different from other bourbons?
Yeah, one big aspect for us, we're in Texas. If you walk outside and you're in Tyler right now, it's raining.
Yeah.
But about an hour ago, it was about 92 degrees. Our bourbon barrels are in an AC control environment. So they're not exposed to the Texas heat. A lot of Texas bourbons has a very strong leathery, dry, woody note, and that's from that heat. We kind of negate that by aging in a AC control environment. We also put into the barrels at a lower proof.
Now, what proof does bourbon typically, there's a bug. Y'all, that's the thing about it being live. The rain, I don't know, maybe I'll show you. The rain, I still have questions for Dylan, but it's pouring out there. It's pouring. It just started falling even harder. We might walk in here so you can hear us a little better. This seems like a good spot right here. So not as pretty though. But
we got a grain back there for next week. We're cooking next week also.
I see that grain. Okay, so a couple questions. One, all right, grain. Where does our grain come from?
Yeah, so all our grain is sourced and it's all Texas grain. We only use Texas grain for our bourbon production.
And then, so we were talking about entry proof of the bourbon. What is a standard entry proof and why do they do that, and what's ours and why do we do that?
Yeah, so the standard entry proof is 125 proof. And if you think about it just in basic economics, is more whiskey you can put in that barrel, you spread your barrel costs. So if you put 125 proof of whiskey into 52 gallons, as it ages, that barrel is, per bottle, is less expensive. We put it at 110. Historically, 100 to 110 has been, you go back to Jack Daniels in their time, that's when they were put in at that proof. It's softer. There are compounds as bourbon ages that are water soluble but not alcohol soluble. So as the evaporation happens, it produces a sweeter, softer, and not harsh bourbon.
So for a lot of bourbon buffs out there, they think we have a pretty heavily weeded mash bill because we have this really delicate sweet note to our bourbon, and that comes from our entry proof.
We also toast our bourbon. I toast our barrels. So we do a toasting and a level 3 char. So every barrel we have is toasted and then charred. That toasting, a lot of people call it the fat person bourbon, because you do get more of those vanilla and sweet notes on those barrels.
That means I like it, y'all. So another thing about this is even though we're in this time where there's a correction in the bourbon market, our bourbon is done in extremely small batches. There's large distilleries that will have separate small batches or single barrels. So if there's anyone interested in coming out and tasting our bourbon, please do so. We did hear through the grapevine, they said, hey, there's a liquor distributor or there's a liquor store, they don't carry your bourbon, they must have shut down. We have not shut down. We're alive and well. We're right here. During this market correction, there's very big distilleries that are contracted with distributors. So the way the alcohol sales works in the Texas market is there's a 3-tier system. So for spirits, we must, by law, sell to get them to another location. We have to sell the spirits to a distributor, and then the distributor distributes that to either a package store or another restaurant. So our distributor said, hey, Kiepersol, we like selling their wine, but these bourbon guys are pressed. They're pressed with their contracts. They have to sell it. So they said we're too little to bother. So thankfully the law allows us to sell 4 bottles per month per customer. So we are now literally a micro distillery. There are still some we call them unicorns in the market where you can get, if you're from Houston, Austin, San Antonio,
Dallas.
Of course, Dallas. There's quite a few stores that still carry Jimmy's bourbon. But if you want to help us during this time, this lull in the season, go into the liquor store and just say, hey, do you have it? We need a demand in the marketplace because we've got to snag another distributor. For us to get our product out there, we have to have a distributor, and we just were too small to maintain the relationship with our distributor. And it's interesting, in this time, even the distributors are having massive buyouts, and there's a disruption in the wine and spirit industry happening right now. So if you're out of town, snag a bottle while you can get it. Ask for us. We need that demand in the marketplace to get somebody to pick us up. In the meantime, come by here and see us. What else do you think we need to tell you? Y'all have any questions? I see quite a few watching. If there's any other questions you have about the distillery.
Or bourbon in general, I can answer quite a few of them.
Yeah. And Dylan's here Fridays and Saturdays. I love having him sign the bottles. So if you do come pick up. So right now we're tell us what we're selling and what we're aging.
Yeah, so right now in the Grand Room or the restaurant, you can pick it up at both locations. We have our Jimmy's 90, our Jimmy's 8-year, which can be our cash strength, and our Jimmy's 94. Our Jimmy's 8-year is the younger brother of the Jimmy's 10, essentially. It's still one of the oldest aged bourbons in Texas.
Pretty cool. So the Bible says honor your mother and father very clearly. And some people might wonder, who's Jimmy? It's not Jimmy Russell, the guy that started Wild Turkey. This is Jimmy Hines. This is my husband's grandfather, very, very precious, dear soul. And when he was 90 years old, we told him that we were going to make bourbon. Now, we call him Papa. He passed away in October of 2019, just before COVID, actually. But for a few years there, he was excited because we named the bourbon after him because he told an amazing story about being a World War II torpedo bomber pilot and how they carried the bourbon. It was Jack Daniels or Jim Beam, these fly boys, as he called them, would carry a bottle of bourbon with them in one of their ammo bags, and it became their barter bag. So bourbon had a higher value in the 40s in the South Pacific than American dollars or cigarettes. So if they got shot down behind enemy lines and lived to tell the tale, so would that bottle of bourbon, and they would use that to barter. And he told a phenomenal story, so we wanted to honor him. And then the other spirits that we make, so we have a bourbon line that's called Jimmy's, or the whiskey line, essentially. And then we also have a vodka, or what I like to call the martini line. So our vodka and our gin are named after my grandfather. His name was Dirk. And then we have what I call the vacation line. You guys know if you go somewhere where there is salt water, there's always a rum or a tequila drink available near salt water. And so I was privileged and blessed enough, and some of you might know when you're a kid sitting at a kid's table, I don't know how many of you have ever had your parents say, I'm not your friend, I'm your mom or your dad, but there's this point in life where you become your parents' friend, where you've made it from the kids' table to the adult table, you're having conversations, and you're actually having an alcoholic beverage with them. And it was a beautiful season of my life and my sister's life where our dad was our friend. And we would travel together, and we would drink rum drinks together, and we would drink tequila drinks together. And so our agave spirit and our rum, we perfectly named Pierre's. So we have the Pierre's, we have the Jimmy's, and we have the Dirk's. And then there's one more little sneaky one in there, and that is Jerry's. Jerry is my mother's father, and he loved a good brandy and Coke. Now that might sound weird to you guys. He's South African, from South Africa, and brandy and Coke is a common cocktail there. So if you guys ever want to try brandy and Coke, we have a phenomenal brandy that we produce here and bottle in small batch, of course. So yes, we have a distillery. People don't realize it. So you guys come see us. at the distillery and winery. You can taste our spirits at the Grand Room. If you pop into the restaurant, everything that you drink there that is made from alcohol, aside from Trefethen Chardonnay, which you can see that story online, pretty much, and then some bubbles, are all made right here on the estate. So Dylan, thanks for letting me interrupt you, brother.
Well, thank you.
Y'all take care. We'll see you next Friday.